So somebody once asked me if I live in black and white, and I thought that that was a ridiculous question. Like, of course not. Like, why would I do that? Button. See, not all the time. So today I want to talk a little bit about my thoughts on the announced but not yet out drop THX AA1 linear amplifier. So I want to start off by saying that this is not out yet. I only know what has been released on their webpage. I don't know any insider information at all. I just know what you guys pretty much know, and I have some thoughts about it. And it's quite possible that this video ages quite poorly. So if there's misinformation, or I read something that was on here, or I say something that doesn't end up turning out to be correct, just know that this was recorded before anything really official really came out of it. So it suffices to say it's very possible that things could change drastically by the time that this comes out. But I do kind of want to talk about this thing a little bit because I think this could potentially be a very important amplifier. And I think before we talk about this device, I do want to talk about other devices and why this could have been and could potentially still be a very good, very important amplifier. So one of the things that we have to talk about first is the kind of available competition that is either around the same price tag or going to be competing in terms of the capability of the device. So right now, I think there's actually a big gap in the $100 to $300 category. And the $100 category, in my opinion, the best amp that you can get that is specifically and only an amplifier is the Shit Heresy. It's got about 2.4 watts into 32 ohms. It's $100 and it measures really, really well. And then there's this big gap of 3 times the price to the newly priced dropped THX 789, which went from $400 to $300, and it's, I think, permanently at $300. It doesn't look like it's a sale on their website. And for $300, that's a shit ton of amplifier. To be like completely honest, I think it's got like 6 watts into 32 ohms, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, 6 watts into 32 ohms. The distortion levels are like 0.000032%, so ridiculously low distortion. It's a universally loved amplifier. So there ends up being this gap between like, okay, if you need single-ended and you need quite a bit of power that's very clean, get the Heresy. And if you need a lot of power that's still very clean, you get the 789 or the 887, although the 887 is $100 more than the 789 with very, very minor, I think it's like an extra decibel place of distortion if I'm remembering correctly, but that could be wrong. Anyways, it's $100 more for essentially the same amplifier, so it's hard to recommend that. It does come with a better warranty, but still the 789 seems to be the king of the $300 range as of right now. So then they announced something that has about 10,000 views on their website, which is the drop THX AAA1 linear amplifier. And then they released some kind of highlights or goals that they have for this amplifier. Ultra low distortion with AAA circuit, high voltage swing, ultra low noise THX architecture, power to drive demanding headphones up to about 2 watts into 32 ohms and 1000 watts into 16 ohms and 270 milliwatts into 300 ohms, a 3-position gain switch seen on their 789, a ultra low noise preamplifier output, which is going to be the RCAs out the back. And then this is the interesting part, the $200 Msrp. So the thing with this is that right now, based off the specs that I can see, this really, in terms of capability, nothing else, seems to compete directly with the Heresy, but at double the cost. And it's going to be like, unless they come out with something that measures just like way out of whack better than the Heresy, I think it's going to be a little bit hard for me to recommend on a kind of a price to performance scale. It's going to be harder to recommend the the AAA1 linear amplifier. So I have no doubt that they're going to sell a ton of these, especially because a while ago, people bought their Arist R2R DAC, which has the same form factor and an RCA out that is probably going to fit this perfectly. So a lot of people were kind of confused by that launch because it was a single-ended DAC that had the form factor of their previous line of this 789, which is a balanced amplifier where you're supposed to use balanced inputs. So a lot of people were confused why they developed a single-ended DAC for it. And that includes me. And now we kind of have our answer. I'm sure, I think everybody kind of predicted that this was somewhere down the pipeline. So just based off of the looks and the appearance and the line and being a THX amplifier, I think they're definitely going to sell a ton. And as a reviewer, if it measures really well, I could kind of recommend it just to have like a stack that you really enjoy. If it's worth the extra $100 over as of right now, directly competing amplifier being that Heresy, if that extra $100 is worth it to you, then fine. But I think on a dollar per dollar perspective, I think it's going to be hard to recommend it unless it's doing something that is far superior that we just haven't seen released yet, because it seems to be making actually slightly less power. Now, I'm not sure what the warranty is going to be, but drops warranties are usually about a year, so I think it's probably going to fall somewhere in the line of that. Now, I think another difficult part about this is that it's small, but it's not as small as the Heresy. Like the Heresy fits a smaller form factor, so more people who want a small amplifier, I should say, are going to prefer the Heresy just because of the size if they're looking for something tiny. But the other part of this is that there's not really anything that would incentivize previous owners of the 789 to additionally get this. They have had other offerings in the same form factor that do different things. For example, they have the Cavalli Tube Hybrid, which does something different than the 789 does. Now, one potential area that this could fill is the people who don't want the balance aspect of things like the 789 or the 887, and they want their single-ended performance of something like the Magni because they don't want to either upgrade their DAC to a balanced DAC, or they like using single-ended, or they don't want to pay for the extra cables, which is honestly 100% understandable. I mean, it's expensive to make that switch to balanced, and nowadays with amplifiers measuring as well as they are with single-ended performance, the benefits of upgrading are honestly starting to diminish quite rapidly. And really the only reason standing now that I think applies to a broader market is usually the power of the actual amplifier. Generally speaking, the most powerful amplifiers for the price that also measure well happen to be balanced amplifiers, or balanced. Like 789 is not a truly balanced amp, but it does use balanced inputs and balanced outputs, measures well, ton of power, so it's essentially balanced. Now, one area that I actually think that this could offer a relatively noticeable improvement on is going to be IEM performance, and specifically really sensitive IEMs. So these are like the FUR M5s, but they're 6 ohm, and out of this, which is the THX 887, which actually measures slightly better than the 789, although I think listening wise, they're just about the same amplifier. But out of the single-ended performance, there is a little bit of a hissing or kind of an underlying buzz. There's a little bit of a noise floor to it. Now, if they can nail down the noise floor on it so that really, really efficient IEMs like this aren't picking it up, I could see that as kind of a workaround, and definitely a use case that some people might want from their amp, because as of right now, if I want a totally clean performing sound for these FUR M5s, I can't use something like this. Now, this is totally clean for less efficient headphones, like full-size headphones or even less efficient IEMs. But when it comes to really efficient stuff, this doesn't work. Now, reading through some of the comments on here, there is a common price point that I think a lot of people would appreciate seeing this at, and it's $150. And I kind of tend to agree with that. So I think for certain people, including people like me, I'd be more than happy to pay $50 extra for a build that I like better. And personally, I would like the One's build better than the Magni. One, the Magni moves around a lot when you try and plug stuff in because it's really small. The red and black is not going to be everybody's cup of tea on the Magni. And I already have things that fit the size of the One amplifier, and a lot of people do, especially if they've bought these previous THX products. So for me, assuming that the performance is equal to the Magni, I could honestly recommend and see myself purchasing an extra $50 item with the same performance just to get kind of a matching system. Like, it may not matter to you, but to some people like me, I like to have everything as matching as I can get it and as clean as I can get it. So in terms of price, I think it's gonna be a big sticking point for a lot of people. I think $150 is kind of like, if you're gonna play on the same playing ground and you want a better build, then yeah, $150 is worth it. $100 extra or double the amount. I mean, you can buy an entire shit stack for, $100 Modi and $100 Magni Heresy and get insane specs and insane performance for that $200, and you get an entire audio system as opposed to just the amplifier. So when it comes to this, I am curious of how you guys perceive this. Do you think the $200 price point is good? Do you think $150 is better? Or do you say if it doesn't compete in terms of specs, then it should be not a consideration? I think there are other things about amplifiers that are not just specs, like the form factor, for example, like warranties, and extra features that it may or may not have that might be valuable. It does have one extra gain stage setting over the Magni, which just has high and low, though I don't think that's enough to justify the price, but to some people that may be very, very important. So these are my thoughts on this, and I'm very curious about your thoughts. So please leave them in the comment section down below. I'll link everything I talked about in this video in the description. And until the next video, my name is Josh, signing off.